If you ask, which country has the biggest economy in Southeast Asia? Most people might say Thailand, Singapore, or Malaysia. But the real answer is Indonesia. In 2021, its nominal GDP reached about USD 1.19 trillion, ranking around 16th in the world, nearly twice Thailand's and roughly triple many neighbors like Malaysia, the Philippines, or Vietnam. Continuing our series on world nations, today we head to Indonesia, the economic engine of Southeast Asia. Geographically, Indonesia is the world's largest archipelagic nation in Southeast Asia, stretching roughly 5,120 kilometers from east to west. It counts over 7,500 islands, about 6,000 of which are inhabited. 5 major islands form the country's backbone: Sumatra, Java, Borneo, Indonesia's portion is Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and New Guinea. The western half is Indonesia's Papua Barat. The total land area is about 1.9 million kilometers squared. On land, Indonesia borders Malaysia, on Borneo, Kalimantan, Papua New Guinea, on New Guinea, and Timor-Leste, on Timor. Its highest peak is Puncak Jaya, also known as Karsten's Pyramid, at 4,984 mm. Straddling the equator, Indonesia sits in a tropical monsoon belt with 2 main seasons, wet and dry, and virtually no summer-winter contrast like in temperate zones. In places such as Kalimantan and Sumatra, rainfall and temperature only shift slightly between seasons. Tectonically, much of Indonesia lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, making it one of the world's most volcanically and seismically active regions. Hundreds of volcanoes, with 120 plus still active. The trade-off is clear: higher natural disaster risk, but also exceptionally fertile soils that have long underpinned Indonesian agriculture. Historically and culturally, Indonesia is a mosaic of hundreds of ethnic communities with close linguistic and anthropological ties. Archaeologists have even found bronze drums on Java that resemble the Dong Sun tradition of Vietnam, evidence of early regional connections. For more than 2 millennia, maritime trade routes linked China, Southeast Asia, India, turning the Indonesian archipelago into a hub for spices, agarwood, medicinal herbs, and other tropical goods. Wet rice agriculture took root early, from the 1st millennium BCE, seeding dense networks of villages, towns, and small polities across the islands. From the 4th to 7th centuries, Tarumanagara rose in West Java, shaped by Hindu-Buddhist influences. Beginning in the 7th century and lasting into the 14th, Srivijaya on Sumatra grew into a powerful maritime empire, policing the sea lanes through the Strait of Malacca and emerging as a major Buddhist and seafaring center. At its height, Srivijaya projected authority from Sumatra and Java to the Malay Peninsula. But by the late 14th century, the balance of power shifted eastward. Majapahit rose in East Java. Under the stewardship of Pati, Grand Vizier, Gajah Mada, roughly 1331 to 1364, Majapahit built what you might call a grand mandala of influence, a wide, layered sphere that encompassed much of modern-day Indonesia and extended into the Malay Peninsula. Majapahit eventually unraveled, pulled apart by civil war, a shift in trade toward rising Muslim port cities, and new religious political networks that dulled the old mandala machinery. Once the sea gates slipped from Java's control, the arteries of customs and commerce lost their pulse. The Majapahit chapter closed, ushering in an era of coastal Muslim sultanates across the Nusantara, the wider Malay-Indonesian archipelago. A common question follows: why did Hinduism and Buddhism, both early arrivals, lose primacy when over 86% of Indonesians today are Muslim? The core reason is timing and networks. From the 12th century onward, though Muslim traders from Arabia, India, and Persia had sailed these waters since about the 7th century, Islam took root in the coastal polities that controlled trade. Later, as local dynasties adopted Islam and elevated it to state religion at key power centers, the faith spread widely and durably, reshaping the religious landscape of the archipelago. In the early 16th century, 1511, the Portuguese seized Malacca, opening the door to European colonialism in the region. By the 17th century, however, Portugal's grip had weakened. In 1619, the Dutch East India Company, VOC, captured Jayakarta, renamed it Batavia, and began steadily tightening its influence over local polities. Through the 19th century, the Dutch expanded control across Sumatra and eastern Indonesia. Brutal campaigns culminated in the fall of the last holdouts. Bali, the Puputan suicides of 1906 to 1908, and Aceh, the Aceh War ending in the early 1910s. By then, the colonial project was essentially complete. For nearly 3 centuries, Indonesians rose up again and again. Most revolts were crushed. The turning point came in World War II. In 1942, Japan defeated the Dutch and occupied the archipelago. After Japan's surrender, on 17th August 1945, Sukarno, with Muhammad Hatta, proclaimed Indonesian independence. The Dutch returned with British support, forcing Indonesians into 4 more years of war. Only on 27th December 1949 did the Netherlands recognize Indonesia's sovereignty and withdraw. Indonesia has a historical knot you can't skip: Timor-Leste, formerly East Timor. After the Portuguese became the first European power in the archipelago, the Dutch gradually took over most of what is now Indonesia. Yet the eastern half of Timor remained Portuguese. In 1975, when Portugal withdrew, East Timor briefly declared independence. Within days, Indonesian forces moved in. By 1976, the territory was annexed as Indonesia's 27th province, Timor. The local population, predominantly Catholic, rejected the annexation. Under mounting international pressure, Indonesia accepted a UN-supervised referendum in 1999. A clear majority voted to separate. After a transition period, East Timor formally regained independence on 20 May 2002, under its international name, Timor-Leste. On demographics, Java is the most populous island on Earth, home to over half of Indonesia's people. Nationally, the population density sits around 150 people per kilometer, roughly, and UN projections suggest Indonesia could reach somewhere 320 million by 2050. The population is young, median age 30, but distribution is anything but even across 17,000 plus islands. From mega-urban Jakarta, one of the world's largest metro areas, to remote highland communities in Papua that are still largely cut off from the outside world. An estimated 9 to 10 million Indonesians live abroad, principally in Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the United States, and Australia. Indonesia also stands out for its ethnic diversity. Over 1,300 indigenous groups, a reminder of just how varied the cultural map is. The Javanese are the largest community, about 40% of the population, and wield significant political influence. Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesia, is the national language and is spoken almost universally, alongside 700 plus local languages. Despite more than 3 centuries of Dutch rule, Dutch today is rarely used in everyday life. The sheer spread of people across thousands of islands and uneven infrastructure creates big challenges for education and healthcare, especially in remote regions. On religion, while the Constitution guarantees freedom of belief, the state formally recognizes 6 religions: Islam, Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. Other faiths or belief systems may be practiced, but their legal recognition is often partial and can vary by locality. Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim-majority country. Roughly 86–87% of citizens are Muslim, the vast majority Sunni, about 99% within the Muslim community, with Shia making up a very small share. Unlike the Middle East, Indonesia is a secular state. Only Aceh enforces extensive Sharia-inspired bylaws on social and moral conduct. A few notes often misunderstood. Indonesia does not practice stoning to death. In Aceh, typical penalties include public caning, fines, or imprisonment under local bylaws. Polygamy is not an automatic right. National law permits it only under strict conditions: court approval, prior consent of the existing wife, and other requirements. On the economy, Indonesia runs a mixed model where both the private sector and the state carry real weight. It's the only G20 member in Southeast Asia and the region's largest economy. In 2021, nominal GDP stood at about USD 1.19 trillion, 16th worldwide, while PPP GDP was roughly USD 3.5 trillion. GDP per capita, PPP, hovered around USD 12.8K. The structure is fairly balanced. Services 43%, industry 40%, and agriculture on 13%. Indonesia is also rich in natural resources: oil and gas, coal, tin, copper, gold, nickel, and more. And right now, Indonesia is effectively the world's nickel capital, supplying around half of global output, a pivotal link for EV batteries. Laterite nickel from Sulawesi and Maluku traditionally feeds NPI ferronickel for stainless steel, but the country is pushing deeper into HPAL processing to produce nickel sulfate for high-energy cathodes, NMC-NCA. Backed by export bans on raw ore and a wave of FDI in refining, Indonesia is stitching together a near-close value chain: mine, smelting, battery chemicals, next, active materials and cells. Even as LFP chemistry gains ground in mass-market EVs, nickel still anchors segments that demand higher energy density and longer range. The trade-off is clear: environmental and energy costs in extraction and processing. Whoever solves that puzzle best will hold a strategic edge in the EV era. Agriculture benefits from exceptionally fertile soils, with standouts like rice, palm oil, coffee, cocoa, spices, rubber, sugarcane, and tea. On the export ledger, palm oil and coal, including briquetted coal, are mainstays. Indonesia was once the only Southeast Asian member of OPEC, reaping windfall gains during the 1970s oil boom. After late 1980s reforms lowered investment barriers, FDI surged, especially into export-oriented manufacturing. From 1989-1997, growth averaged above 7% a year. Later, as oil output fell and domestic demand rose, Indonesia left OPEC, with brief in-and-out episodes, out in 2009, a short return in 2016, then suspended again, and became a net importer of crude. Between 2007 and 2019, growth held around 4 to 6%. A steadier banking system and resilient domestic demand helped the country ride out the 2008-2009 downturn and regain momentum by early 2011. In short, Indonesia is a secular, multi-faith state with a Muslim majority and a large open economy powered by resources, industry, and services. Its growth engine draws strength from a vast home market, institutional reforms, and its role as a key link in regional supply chains. The development picture, though, tilts west-east. Islands like Java and Sumatra concentrate people and infrastructure, while many parts of eastern Indonesia remain poorer and underserved in public services. Indonesia is a regional heavyweight, but its mix still leans heavily on assembly, extractives, and farm commodities. The core tech sectors are now accelerating. Think the nickel, EV battery chain, electronics, and automotive. Thanks to a vast home market and strategic resources, higher value stages of global value chains are steadily shifting into Indonesia. Politically, after the eras of Sukarno, 1945-1967, and Suharto, 1967-1998, marked by anti-communist campaigns and intervention in East Timor, the country moved through deep democratization. Joko Widodo served 2014-2024 Since 2018 to 2024, Prabowo Subianto has been the incumbent president, term 2024-2029. On defense, Indonesia is often ranked among Southeast Asia's strongest. The Air Force fields a sizable mixed fleet, most notably around 33 F-16 Fighting Falcons, with plans to add newer generation platforms. For armor, Indonesia stands out as the only Southeast Asian country to develop its own tank, the Harimau, also Kaplan MT, a medium tank. It also operates 100-plus Leopard 2 tanks from Germany, mainly Leopard 2A4 Plus and Leopard 2 RI, roughly 42 and 61 units, respectively. Even so, judged on armor alone, Indonesia sits roughly in the global 40-50 range, and the archipelagic terrain simply isn't ideal for showcasing large armored forces. In contrast, the Navy is the true backbone, a large mix of warships and support vessels built to police a vast maritime space stitched from thousands of islands. The defense budget, a little over USD 10 billion, about 0.7% of GDP, isn't huge for the size of the force, and a common critique is the lack of large-scale combat experience since independence. Today's challenges are plain to see. Population is unevenly spread across the archipelago, making it hard to lift living standards and expand education and healthcare everywhere. Deforestation and peatland over-extraction drive environmental decline, with forest fires and cross-border haze that affect the wider region. Social cohesion can be tested in such a multi-ethnic landscape. In Aceh and Papua, separatist currents have surfaced at times, prompting firm security responses. On biodiversity, Indonesia is home to the Komodo dragon, the world's largest living lizard, a formidable predator now threatened as its habitat shrinks and thus placed under strict protection. In sports, Indonesia has never won the AFF Cup, but holds a bittersweet record with 6 runner-up finishes. On the flip side, Pencak Silat is a point of pride, a traditional martial art featured widely at the SEA Games and Asian Games, where Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia are perennial medal contenders. Within ASEAN, Indonesia plays a clear locomotive role. It's not just history and institutions. The ASEAN Secretariat sits in Jakarta, and foundational documents like the Bali Concords were signed in Indonesia. But also the country's geostrategic position as the world's largest archipelago, straddling the sea lanes between the Indian and Pacific Oceans, via Malacca, Sunda, Lombok, Makassar, and more. With the world's 4th largest population and standout land area in the region, Indonesia commands substantial maritime presence and control. Its defense spending is also among the largest in ASEAN. In short, Indonesia isn't only ASEAN's engine by scale, people, geopolitics, sea corridors. It's a living case study of how a multi-ethnic archipelago navigates between natural resources, industrialization, and environmental social challenges. From the legacies of Srivijaya and Majapahit to a dynamic democracy today, Indonesia shows the real heft of Southeast Asia when the region moves in step. If this journey was useful, please like and share so more people can watch. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episode. Thank you for watching.